Good morning. It is Tuesday, February 6th, and we are in Senate Economic Development, Health and General Affairs. We have Peter Tucker in the witness chair. Sadly, just for a brief while, because we're voting the bill out this week. But we've asked Peter for a couple pieces of information on behalf of the realtors and just to share his thoughts on the bill.
Great.
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for having me, Peter Tucker, for the Vermont Association of Realtors. And I would first off like to start by thanking this committee for Act Work 7. I mean, last year's work was tremendous in addressing the housing crisis. I think that what we're seeing this year is the crisis kind of moving to a property tax crisis. As we're looking at how do we address property taxes, I think that pardon me?
We're gonna fix it.
I'm talking to the right people.
But but expanding the grant list is
Yes.
the simplest,
Yes.
most effective way. The outside of the committee, when I'm talking to my friends, I say, well, I don't want to pay more taxes. I want more people to pay taxes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
balance the load. And, unfortunately, it's not a this year fix. But it is something that's super important and your work is really headed in the right direction. So I'd like to make some comments on the bill overall, and then I know you asked specifically about the flood disclosure questions, and I've kind of prepared for that as well. And I've got this by section.
Mhm. Okay, I have my
If you want-
sections up.
Yeah, you're a section person, so, the
I
section.
can help others.
Section 4 addresses recorded hearings, and I guess the only comment that I have there, or I have a very specific comment, and that is hearings, appeals forwarded to the environmental board. The best way I can describe this is, our democracy created 3 branches of government: legislative, judicial, and administrative. And to think that an administrative board is going to hear appeals really just doesn't fit with the way our government is set up to operate. Just leave it at that.
Now, I don't have the language, but we've heard that what I heard from the committee is that we'd be removing the de novo
Yes.
section anyway, and Senator Harrison's working on something about making sure there's signing.
And I don't know,
Yeah.
on the record or de novo, I
Right.
think that's a
Yeah.
question for lawyers, not for me.
Yeah,
But I am really clear that I think that you need judicial oversight.
yeah,
The people that make the
Keeping environmental
rules
board.
can't provide judicial oversight on the rules.
Right.
And
Got it.
and as simple as that. Section 6 deals with development, and I think this is where your work from last year continues.
Mhm.
To have 30 units within 0 miles, thank you, Senator Harrison, for that, and 2
You're
years.
getting the credit or the blame.
No,
Yeah.
credit, absolute credit. I have asked the question of everybody that I can think of about why 5 years, 5 miles, and nobody's, really come up with good explanation other than, it controls development, so.
Senator Harrison.
It just, if you want me to, because I only feel like everything that I think about this. Paragraph, but I can talk about that later.
Yeah, we can do that, yeah, sure, yeah,
Yeah.
so.
It's the feasible, right? It's the feasibly, right?
Mhm.
So we'll talk about that with
Yeah,
that.
the feasibly question. Yeah, I was kind of curious about that word as well. But, I think that, my opinion is where the pipe goes, I have the ability to develop. That's kind of,
Mhm.
the simplest explanation I can give. Downtowns, village centers, growth areas, including those, this is where you want development. So I think that that's good. And then, small, which adds a half a mile around designation areas, is
Or, we have it right.
right more, I ignored the or. No. But I do think that that's a good starting point. I think the maps ultimately are the right solution because they will be more geographically based, that it's not a round circle, right? It's something other than that.
Senator,
On the maps.
why don't we let you
Okay.
finish, just because
Okay,
I want to make sure we hear everything.
okay. No, I didn't have a question for you.
Yep. Section 9 deals with prime ag soils, and my only comment there is, why in designated areas? And then, when I'm thinking about a lot of designated downtowns and village centers, I'm not sure how much prime ag soils there are there. I would kind of jump around here, or not jump around, but skip things. Yeah, and it appeals to the environmental division is, it should be an appeals to the environmental board, I believe. And you're actually including a new judge, so of course should be able to handle it, an appeal vote. Great. The big one, right, is the new tiers in this bill, and I think that we were part of the Natural Resources Board summer study. The evolution of tiers, I think, was a great way to look at, kind of match the designations more or less. And I thought that the NRB study really kind of got this right. One of the things that is in the study for Tier 1A is, the exemptions that are offered and growth areas for the next 20 years. That dropped in the report off of Tier 1B. And I think that it's important for those Tier 1B towns with permanent subdivision zoning bylaws and capacity, to really, when the planners are doing their work, to really look at what does that look like for the next 20 years, not just limit it to 1A towns. And then, our thoughts on this, and we've seen a number of different variations on the way the tiers would be addressed, is that qualifying for tiers needs to be within reason, within the abilities of the towns that are going to be applying for them. Towns with permanent subdivision and zoning bylaws have decent capacity. When I was in earlier, Senator Cummings was mentioning a very small town, which is probably a 1 acre town, right, would qualify anyhow. But, the capacity changes from town to town, and actually from, one board to the next board in the same town, it can change dramatically. So, we think that keeping this simple to qualify is going to be very important. Certainly there's a lot of language out there for it, so that's a concern for us. Where we really, and let's just deal with Tier 3, which says, that's natural, habitats, high elevations, things of that nature, which obviously we want to protect and have the highest levels of control over. Our concern is Tier 2, which is everything else. I mean, if you take Tier 1A, you take Tier
And having this
1B,
conversation all weekend.
Yeah.
Tier 2 is huge.
Yeah.
And it's diverse. It
Right.
has 1 acre towns,
Right.
it has farmland, it has forest land, it has other, transfer, connective areas. It is the majority of the state.
Yeah.
And I think that applying the road rule, especially in Tier 2, is too broad. Obviously, applying it to Tier 3 makes a tremendous amount of sense. But, is there a way to bifurcate Tier 2, I guess, to make it, this is kind of more sensitive areas and more kind of moderate development areas, think about a 1 acre town. It's that would do that, so.
We definitely asked some of our stakeholders to go back and think about Tier 2 and define it more. I think there's some sense, I will say, and I had this conversation with a lot of stakeholders this weekend, that the road rule helps develop the kind of things we might want to see in Tier 2, that, people are nervous about big cuts of road and big, carving out of the hillside.
Right.
And that they want to keep some environmental protections there. But I'd like to see more housing there, potentially a PHP definition for senior housing and affordable housing that allows. And again, it's not saying, I guess the road rule is saying you can't have a road more than 2,000.
No, you would fall under.
Or you would just
50.
fall under it.
Yeah, all
And
it
then you would
says
have
is
to
Yeah.
prove-
but
Right.
Federal Act 250,
Yeah.
which is not the end of the world.
It does have a lot of criteria for, kind of how that road is designed and,
Right.
you avoid, mitigate, or,
But
This is part of what we see as some kind of give and take outside of the committee
Mhm.
that we'd have a hard time unraveling, but noted your
Right,
concerns.
right. And I think it's, Tier 2 isn't one kind of.
Right,
Tier
Yeah.
two is a variety of things.
Tier
Yeah.
two may need it, one A and B too.
Pardon me?
Tier two may need an A and B
Oh,
also,
is it?
but we're waiting to
Thank
hear
you.
from the stakeholder.
Mhm.
What Senator Clarkson said. Absolutely, that's great.
You can do that all the time, yeah.
I'm trying. Just a couple other things, VHIP program, bumping that up to 70,000, I think makes sense. Everything we hear from the agency says this is a good productive program, and, I think that makes a lot of sense. Section 49 land bank study, I actually sat here, I think, 3 years ago.
Yes.
And we had that discussion.
Definitely.
And, and the chair at the time, Senator Sorokin, said, gee, maybe, the regional development corporations would be willing to take this on. I actually met with them this fall and I said, what do you guys think? I said, look, I'm not going to push this forward too far unless you guys are interested in it.
Yeah,
And I think there was interest, there was concern. They said, look, we're mostly industrial and commercial and, we want to make sure we stay in our lane. But at the same time, they were open to the discussion. The challenge is how do towns move properties to, a land bank? And then, how are they kind of put on the marketplace and what's the financial mechanism that works there? I don't have the answer to it, so I'm really happy to see a study and would appreciate the opportunity to participate in it.
Great.
So that would be great.
whatever it is, it will be informal, because we all are trying to lighten the load on our large council, our formal studies. So, I hope you'll be a part of it. I think of you and your team bringing this forward, but DHCD will kind of hold the
Sure.
informal process.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's, I don't know the answers, so I appreciate the opportunity to
Right.
kind of do some research and find them for you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and then on the rental registry, we testified in House General last year on the rental registry and, we were I actually had a committee that was exactly split in the middle. 6 said, it's governmental oversight. 6 said, probably would be good to know where all the rental properties are. I think probably now we would say probably good to know where all the rental properties are. So we're supportive of it,
Great.
but it went over Ways and Means and Senator Cummings, you may be asked the same question, and that is, how can, what does it cost to set up a rental registry? And that's kind of where it
We know
stopped.
that.
That's where it stopped.
We have a notion of that.
Yeah, exactly. So then I'm on to, the disclosure of floods.
Yeah.
At the time of sale of properties or the time of leasing of properties. And I think that your approach is actually really good. We're looking at this in the House General as well.
Okay,
Your language or House General, upper H 639 and 556 to address the disclosure at the sale or the disclosure in mobile home parks. Your 3 sections actually add a component for rental properties, which I think is really smart to do.
okay,
That it's good. Real estate rules require us to disclose all material facts within the licensee's knowledge. It's not that we can know everything, but anything that we do know, we need to make sure the buyer is aware of at the time a transaction's put together. To put, we typically seek out information from our owners, when we're listing a property for sale to determine, kind of what are the facts of the property. So we have to do it, we do probably 3/4 of the transactions in the state on real estate. I actually was interviewed, and I said, I'm not, for that other quarter, how important is it? But it certainly would bring for sale by owners and kind of private sales into the mix. And I think that it's worthwhile. We can't disclose for owners. All we can do is encourage owners to disclose. As a matter of fact, our rules are written that if an owner says, I'm not going to disclose that, we can't take the listing. We have to walk away from the deal. I mean, it's
Second wall, a vendor next door,
Mhm.
and I had to talk to them to revealing it.
Right. So to the section of this, the first is to disclose, whether the property's in a FEMA, mapped area, flood hazard area. And many of the FEMA maps are out of date.
Right.
Some towns, Montpelier is one,
Right.
they have pretty decent.
We're
maps.
changing that to say you're required to carry flood insurance,
Mhm.
just so people don't get a second indication that the map is
Mhm.
like
Right.
the most
is,
accurate piece.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we barring imperfect information right now, we hear that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, but it's definable, it's findable, you know, you
Mhm.
can search it on the GIS mapping system. You know, I know, I was at a listing for sale and somebody asked me, is this in a floodplain? And I was like, no, it's up on a hill. Then I thought about it, I said, I better look at the map first, and really literally across the road was a floodplain and this place was not, but you know, that's the reality is we need to understand that stuff.
Yeah.
Property flooding, has your property flooded?
Mhm.
You know, how far back is that gonna go? You know, in 1927, a lot of
So I
properties
think-
flooded.
I think we're removing that piece too.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ellen's time is precious, especially when she walks back in the door. She's in the witness chair. So
Yep.
I know Senator Clarkson had a question. I just want to
Oh, sure.
get to your final.
Yep.
Yeah,
Are you finished?
I just didn't want you to go
Finish.
through sections that we're gonna change.
Right, no, I'm
No,
just
you're not
gonna, I'm
finished.
done with this, or I'm gonna just complete with this section. I'm gonna
Okay.
stop talking, but go ahead if you have.
Do you have any other sections you
Oh,
wanted to?
yeah, no, I think,
Oh, great.
well, I do have one more thing, and
Okay.
this is on flood insurance. You know, and in preparation for this meeting, our government affairs committee meets every other Monday. Yesterday was the day.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I have members who are, you know, kind of giving me feedback on these things. And we looked at the entire, this entire section. You know, she, had a client who had to get a to get flood insurance, you need flood certification, you know, how far
Mhm.
above the floodplain are you? And, you know, so that is about an $800 cost. You know, but she had a property
Yeah.
where they could not establish the stream, you know, the stream level. You know,
Okay.
there was no benchmark to do that. And as a result, there's no way to understand what
Okay.
you're, you know,
You're welcome to keep working with us on that language, Ellen. I'm just gonna
Yep.
have Peter switch out. Alice, now you can ask your question.
I'm gonna ask my question quickly, and
Okay.
it's to actually everybody, but Peter's in
Oh.
the chair. We very much, as you know, a lot of this is interim until we get all three pieces, all three legs of the stool in place so that we can make final decisions on all this. Mapping is critically important, as you mentioned,
yes.
to our getting this work finished. I would like to know what your carrot is for towns to do this in a timely fashion. That is, so I'd love to have you think about that and let me know what you think. You
Okay.
have your boots on the ground, the realtors, and
This bill goes on Friday, so we're gonna move on.
Ellen.
Can you do it outside of committee with Ellen's time? Ellen is incredibly stretched.
That's fine. And I'm happy
Yeah.
to circle that with you.
Okay.
Thank you for the
I
time.
will too, so I have a question for you.
Okay.
Are we going to do what the opposite?
We're voting it out Friday.
Okay, we're not gonna vote it out, it's committee bill and bring it back.
You know, we've told Natural Resources we give it to them on Tuesday. Hi, Ellen. Good morning. What I thought would be most productive is, you know, I sent Ellen a summary of all of the changes I heard, but to review that with the committee and hopefully land on the section about 1/5 of an acre and multi-units on 1/5 of an acre, because we're hearing questions that, you know, I think we had a set of assumptions about. So if at least trying to get to section 19, but going through where we are with each section.
so where are we starting, section 19?
Section 1. I mean, the title, which I could ask Ellen to capitalize the E if we help.
Ellen Trustee Office of Legislative Council, so today,
In,
I'm still on, I still have draft 6.1
Yes.
that we were looking at dated February 1st.
Yes, so there's no new draft yet,
Right.
we're still operating on 6.1.
but I thought it would be good in the committee to talk about summarizing where we are with each section.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense, or do you?
Sure.
Left out 4, right?
Right, so starting on page 1, section 1 is a short title. Section 2 is the building code report, which on Friday you did ask me to strike.
Yeah,
Right, correct.
I have no change right now to the parking effective date for people.
I have to be discussed.
Okay,
And that was my flag because there's a later section related to this section.
with effective dates.
We have to align.
Yes.
That's my comment.
Yeah.
That's what my comment.
Okay.
Yeah, but I didn't think
Okay.
it meant changing this section to
Okay.
align the dates. Does it? Do you want to talk about it now or?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think we should talk about dates last.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have the flag in other sections,
Okay.
including the effective date section. What are your concerns about the section?
The dates, I just.
Oh,
wanna-
that was that was.
No, I just wanna talk about it last, so we
Yeah,
don't
okay.
mess something up after we talked about it.
When you said to be discussed, I didn't know about something else.
No,
Okay.
sorry,
Align. So we.
and understand.
So then section 4 was the on the record hearings, and so on Friday you did also ask me to strike that.
Yeah.
And that's the whole
I didn't-
section, right? I didn't know if it was the whole thing or.
Okay, because I didn't know if Senator Harris still wanted her signage piece and that
Yeah,
lives on without these sections.
Yeah.
be draft.
So,
Well,
yeah,
That's
it's,
not.
that wasn't part of this.
Okay, I didn't,
Right.
yeah, as we talked about it here, I wasn't sure if it had to be
Yeah.
in here. So we're removing the de novo piece, but you're working on a signage.
yes,
We've got a piece of paper.
And then so then that brings us to section 6 on page 5. And so this is the section where there's the 3 conflicting provisions about how you want to set exemptions.
And so the first thing that comes up is something Wendy, Senator Harris was concerned about, just from as I read it chronologically.
the feasibility.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm very concerned about that.
I thought we.
And I've been-
Supposed to be.
We did say that, but that's also, I have concerns about that too. It's really important that we not put housing, or that we not encourage housing that is supposed to have water and sewer or intended to have water and sewer in places where there might not be water and sewer. I think we need a level of confidence that there will be water and sewer. And what Peter said about where the pipe goes, that's great. We need to find language to,
If we just take feasibly, we've got areas served by municipal water and sewer.
Right.
Intended to be, I don't know. I think the one thing we heard over and over again was towns used to take responsibility for saying, here's where the new water and sewer will be. Developers come build your housing on top of it. And more developers are having to build the underground infrastructure. So it's like a chicken egg problem. That's what we're hearing with this, why this piece was not.
So
Yeah.
are you requiring that lots of industrial park out Route 2 between here and Middlesex because of the cost of running the city's water and sewer out there? So you're saying that if somebody wanted to put 30 units out on Route 2 and there was no water and sewer there, it ends with the creamy stand in the apple orchard. You want to take it out further, that the town would be required to come up, it's the cost that's stopping the towns now.
Well, they could, the project folks could say, we'll pay for it. You know, we'll pay for the additional expense. But if you say served by municipal water and sewer, I think it introduces that chicken egg problem. If the city can't afford it, but it can feasibly be part of the water sewer infrastructure, you'd be opening the door for the developer to pay for that infrastructure.
Well, we've got a lot out here in Barry Street, the city water and sewer goes by it. It's not that, it's running the sewer line up into the project that's stopping the city.
So from your meadows, from
Yes.
that project.
It's the cost of hitching, onto the line, which is the
Right.
bottom of the field, and running it into all those houses.
So maybe if we go back to, we're talking about an Act 250 exemption for 30 units. So the question being, if it's cost prohibitive or the town doesn't want it, that still has a place, but it wouldn't trigger Act 250 if the town and the project agreed on how they were gonna deliver the water and sewer.
We had also talked about this as one of our interim measures, or that this would be under the umbrella of interim work, and so, I don't know how that affects the language that we may or may not want to use, because this could conceivably also be sort of by septic and wells. So,
I
I don't know how, yeah, I don't know how that affects this conversation,
Right.
but
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
you asked me to talk to the planners, and I
Yes.
have.
Yeah.
And so far, there's not a good solution. What would be ideal, and they agreed with this, is that if the town had an ultimate service area or future service area
Mm-hmm.
defined
proposed or, yeah.
and approved by the select board or whatever the governing body of the utility is, and had a financial plan, that would be great, because you have some certainty that it will come.
I think
Um,
that goes to Peter's point about a pretty high bar, right? Especially when you say financial plan, like, right, if they're
But-
designating it for service.
But really,
For
utilities
future
should have financial plans. I mean, that's not unreasonable. The utility should have a plan.
Plan in place that's approved.
Well, a developer could come along and say, I'll pay for it, I'll pay for
Right,
this,
right.
you know, but they might not, that might not be part of their plan.
Or the municipality could pay for half and that could be their contribution. So
Yeah.
I think the financial, what the developer puts in is a separate conversation from the readiness of the property for water and
To be
sewer.
developed.
Right,
Because unless the developer's going to make a utility, you really need to look at the capability of the utility
mhm.
in this to exempt it from Act 250.
So,
This is, I'm still having those conversations.
Okay.
And I think what we should do
okay,
is get DEC in here and talk about
yeah,
how these systems get permitted. And at what point do you have maybe, I think 80% likelihood is just a number that would make me feel okay that it's likely to happen. So at what point are you at 80% likelihood that this development is going, that the water and sewer is going to be there?
that sounds,
Possible.
I'm just gonna caution to say it can't be too complicated.
I think this may be going further than we're ready to.
Yeah, and
Well, that's why the
this
interim
doesn't have
discussion was important.
well, even, I mean, doing this for 3 years could really make some messes.
But I think your bar of having it approved in a town plan or approved by the select board is, I don't think that's.
Yeah, the future
unreasonable.
service area
Because
and
that has to be identified in a town
It-
plan, and it's gonna have to be
it should
identified on
be.
our maps.
Right.
it gives
and
the
they have that
municipality
now.
that control,
That's
it doesn't take that away.
Right, but is the municipality really going to do it? That's the question. Because if we're allowing folks to build before the utilities are available or approved or in some sort of expected.
But I think, so,
Situation.
I think the future service area makes sense. This 80%, like, I don't think we're gonna come up with a reasonable formula that's not overcomplicated.
Okay, the
I think
formula,
going through a democratic process that this has a future as
Sure.
a service area is fine.
and
I
that's
just don't want you to
actually
come back with like
Yeah.
fairground.
Oh, no,
you know? But I think, okay, I have a note that you're gonna keep working on this, and I do appreciate Senator Fluxon's flag that this whole section, I'm gonna, convey this to Ellen behind the scenes as well, but, this should be our interim exemption section until the,
I think this should be out. I think to talk about feasibly, you could extend the sewer out or the water out there. Some places that requires you put up holding standpipes so you can get the pressure to.
Right.
It's an expensive proposition that I'm afraid if you do that, then the developer is gonna say, you have to get that out there. I did the first city plan here and there was nothing about water extension. And I'm pretty sure most small towns they don't have city water.
yeah, so they're not included in this.
Yeah,
So we have had a lot of towns say, what does it mean to be served by water and sewer? I think that's the issue. So even if it's interim and we say it has to be served by water and sewer, I'd be happy if you worked on the definition of that.
Of served,
Yeah, because,
It's the water.
that means a pipe.
Or
there.
by
Pipes
water.
are there.
sewer,
mean, well,
because-
Pipe.
okay, but a lot of towns are saying the pipe's there, but can we connect to it? You know, that's the thing, like, they are asking.
And
So you would have a
how-
defined set of conditions
Right,
Yeah.
that you would include.
so that, and I'm
Because
okay
you get
because
it
it's
up
interim,
in
if they
its pasture.
not
it would
potentially
require
served, but we still have to define served.
Sure,
That's
we
been a-
should
that's
define
been an
served,
issue.
okay.
And if we're looking also at some of these other areas, do we, I mean, water and sewer might also be water and septic. Conceivably.
Alright, it might be water or sewer, that, I mean, it does get complicated.
You
but-
have to have a septic plan and you have to have water, whether
Yes.
it's
So
a septic system. There are developments with a communal
Yes.
septic system.
Yes,
correct, and so,
And many
and just
more
thinking, if you
fine.
think
Yeah.
about tier two, and
Absolutely.
tier two's A and B possibly,
Yeah.
that septic is a key.
yes,
A robust septic system.
a community stuff,
Can you put something on the table on Thursday?
probably, yes. But I do need to talk to DEC people, so they need to be available. I need to find them.
Tell Tate,
I will
I
let
really need
Secretary
to talk.
or.
Okay.
Well, and the right one, and what the water, the water chat was in last week, and Brian.
yeah, Brian,
Brian is like the key for you.
yeah, Brian was right, remember?
I don't know if I was here. if I was
Oh, you might have been
testifying. I think I was
Brian.
testifying tomorrow.
Magali.
Okay.
He is the water, the state way.
Redmond, Brian Redmond.
Right, a minute.
Anyway,
Brian,
but-
But we'll figure it out,
Yeah.
yes, thank you, okay,
we got
But this is an out of committee, like,
yeah.
bring it back on Thursday, right? Okay,
it.
Redmond,
Yes.
Ruth, Brian Redmond.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, actually, I have
He is the
emailed him,
whiz.
so, okay, great,
He's the water bins.
done.
so. I have a complicated definition of PHP that I wanted to throw out there.
So is that in section 6?
We're still in section 6, because section 6 would repeal PHPs, our sunsets, our interim provision, and replace them with some of these other interim provisions. That
So your exemption for PHPs would be in tier 2.
eventually, but
So
in.
are we gonna wait for that conversation with stakeholders, or are you wanting to add that?
Well, I'm happy to have them fold this into their thinking, but I kind of mentioned it to them because I hadn't seen anything with the weekend, but I'm throwing this out for the committee's consideration. That we redefine priority housing project to be useful to tier 2 as affordable housing and senior housing. And then we still put a cap on that in tier 2. But that we say, like, that's the kind of housing we need everywhere. We need people to be able to stay near their grandkids. We need workforce who can afford to live in that area. And so the road rule would apply, it would meet other standards, but we would repeal a PHP as this large project that has commercial and residential, but we leave it as affordable housing and senior housing.
But the PHP project only, correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's only 20% affordable housing.
Yes,
Isn't that right?
Yeah, so I have a lot of questions. But
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the first one.
yeah.
Do you wanna have a percentage?
I'd ask the committee. I take it.
I would feel comfortable with that if it was an increase percentage. And remember our debate last year
Right.
is the PHPs, it's only 20% that are required to be affordable. And it's only for 15 years, I think.
Right. So we could, the exemption, I might have written this down.
So I think
I
if
think-
we're gonna do this, I think this needs
yeah.
to be in our conversation.
I defined it as perpetually affordable. Sorry, that's what I wrote and I forgot to use the word perpetually.
Okay.
So the exemption would be for perpetually affordable housing and future.
That's on page 7, right, that exemption. That's where
It's on
it's
page 6.
It's on page 6.
Well,
And
it's actually throughout
Yeah.
Act 250, so I'll have to make changes. I don't know what senior housing is.
And is it defined?
No.
Do we have age specific housing defined?
Not in Act 250. I'm
In
not
Act-
sure if you
In
have.
AHS
Okay.
stuff, in DCF things and.
Well, how do
Okay.
people feel about that concept? We simply
So
need more
only
senior housing
perpetually affordable housing could go in,
or senior housing
or senior housing. That's,
without hitting the Act 250 threshold at 30.
that's the priority housing was mixed use,
Right.
mixed income, mixed. I think you'd get more resistance to a large perpetually affordable.
Right.
If
This
it
is
was
a
a
complete
percent.
departure because PHPs existed in designated areas, so it made sense that you had like a commercial ground floor. This is a complete rework of the idea, just to say, what kind of housing should we allow in tier 2 without making it incredibly expensive and complicated?
How about single family?
So,
I mean, if we keep pushing affordable housing,
This could be single family. You could have 25 cottages for seniors, which is like what a lot of people want. They want like someone else to do the plowing and, but to have their own little.
the condos.
Yeah.
We go to the Freedom Drive condos and then
Right.
SB Meadows.
That really helps people move out of their single family home and into a managed
Do you know what
space.
those condos are going for now?
Too much.
Close to 400,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
perpetual, we could talk about a percent, it doesn't need to be 100% of that
Right.
project.
Yes.
So I think what is concerning about priority housing projects, if you look at these other areas, is you would want to increase maybe the percent of affordable housing,
Yeah.
whether perpetual or not, to maybe 30 or 40%, and then discuss how many years that has to be
I
for,
would-
because
I
remember,
would
it's only
like
for
to
15
see-
years.
One of these units. We keep talking about them, but I haven't sure seen one.
Oh, come to Springfield for PHP,
Yeah.
come to Springfield,
I
I'd love to
have,
show you.
right.
there's one, I'll make
So much.
Corey Parent show us, there's one in St. Albans Town, I believe, that's age specific, so they're little cottages on one road, and one person has to be 55 or older.
Right, and we have,
So they can live multi-generationally, but they have their own little cottage bungalow.
there are quite a few examples of this, and maybe we can gather them.
I got the cottage,
Peter can
I
help
did
us.
get the multi-generation.
Well, because their determination is one person has to be 55 or older. So you could be a grandparent raising your grandchild, you could be 3 generations living in the same household. But to make sure that our seniors are taken care of.
Then what happens when the senior dies?
Or needs a more advanced care facility, then they move to a more advanced care facility.
Are there services,
Property.
are there services that go with this?
This particular, I mean, I don't know if Randy knows what happens, because it's just.
I don't know,
Yeah.
that's why I'm asking the question. So, I mean, I'm just concerned overall about, we continue to make something so incredibly complicated. And this is one of the things that causes these projects, things that we do to fall over on their side. We're trying to make it perfect by incredibly complicating it, and then we ask questions, well, what happens when we ask question after question after question, and we get tied up in it.
Well, so the alternative, which is in the governor's proposal, is to leave the 10 by 5, but make it 10 by 5 by 2. I still think the 10 by 5 creates sprawl and doesn't help us with our senior and affordable housing problem. So that's why I'm asking for,
How many more people we need to administer the number and the age limits and on and on and on. We need to simplify this stuff.
I think this is still pretty simple, honestly, like
So
We're not-
maybe let's draft it out and
Yeah.
look at it, and then, and
The
then.
amount of discussion we have tells me it's not simple.
Well, people know how to do it. I mean, senior housing isn't heavy.
Right.
So somebody knows how to do it.
we're trying to exempt more from Act 250, and that's not gonna be simple. That's just not gonna be simple, not in tier 2. We're dealing with a proposal that's already complicated, but it has a lot of.
Basically, we're saying though, that you can do anything but single family housing.
This is not limiting it to non-single family. Affordable and senior doesn't mean not single family.
Okay, but that's still, it's not dealing with the lack of working people housing.
It
Yeah,
gets
with the-
people out of their big houses.
No, we're not building any more housing for the workforce.
Yes, yes, please, the other part of this is the professionally affordable piece,
Right,
for seniors and workforce.
No,
but it doesn't need to be an apartment building. It could be,
the little housing development where people actually have some space. So they
Right.
can yell at their
I-
kids and the neighbors don't get.
so I literally, there was an example of this. Talk to Charlie Hancock in Montgomery, because we had dinner this weekend, and we talked about this exact scenario where along the main thoroughfare, you know, if you go through Montgomery to J Peak, like the main village, there was a proposal for 30 units, single family, right behind the first row of downtown.
Right, appropriate place.
Really appropriate, and the one neighbor got it stuck in Act 250, and now they're not gonna have 30 single-family homes that are,
Well, they got it stuck in appeals. They've been
Right,
stuck
Okay,
in
that's a
appeals.
different thing. And those would probably be second homes near JP. Cause where's the jobs in
if you ask Charlie, the person was designing workforce housing, not the kind of thing where you have acres to yourself, but you have your own yard, but you're in a little neighborhood.
Fine.
And
That's the appeal. That's not talking about, we are saying you can do anything that is affordable, multifamily or seniors, because no one's threatening.
I didn't say multifamily, I just said affordable or senior.
Okay, affordable, but affordable generally is safe. I want to make sure that we are allowing single-family units that your professionals of color might like to live in, want
Sure.
to succeed, that teachers and people
Right.
with families, so you can have a barbecue in your backyard and the neighbors aren't privy to everything you
That's
say.
big chunks of the rest of the bill. We're allowing people to do multifamily housing to meet the demands of the market. But they can choose to do single family housing because that's also a demand of the market. But it allows them to be flexible without being told you can't have a duplex here, you can't have a quadruplex here, because there are frankly a lot of seniors who would like to live in a building that's taken care of by somebody else.
Oh, I'm ready to do that. I like that idea of being taken care of. And but this is not assisted living, what you're talking about, just starting to.
Right.
I sold the senior living
Yeah.
complex. I was
Right.
the marketing director. There is an assisted living that you can transfer into. It is
That's not that.
somewhat independent living if you get your meal of the day put for you. And light housekeeping, but it's also expensive to provide all that.
Right.
It is, and that's not what this is.
Right, and just to be clear, this takes the 10 by 5 by 2, which will still be in place for your single family homes. That was in the governor's proposal and says, but let's increase the threshold before you get
To
to Act 250 for senior and affordable housing, because that adds a lot of cost to those projects to put them in Act 250.
To 30.
And-
So if you're building single family homes, you're still listed to 10 within 5 miles, within 2 years.
Yes, anywhere else outside of tier 1AB, Ellen?
I'm just trying to figure. Part of the problem we have with housing is the cost. And can you get any economies of scale doing 10 houses?
No, that's right, it's hopefully 30.
That's why I'm trying to.
If it gets to 30, then I think you're big enough so you can get site.
I'm sure the administration, I don't know where Kate went.
Well, they just said.
I'm sure the administration would love us to see all of tier 2 become 30 by 2. I think this is a good time to experiment with trying to build the exact types of housing we need in the interim exemption. And then that will give people a lot of information to finalize tier 2 over the next 3 years. This section is really complicated because it's what we do in the next 3 years or so. Before a lot of other people make it more complicated, but do their bureaucratic work.
And
Yeah.
and Madam Chair, I think this will be helped by the stakeholders for acts that are drafting the tier 2 conversation. To have that conversation in conjunction with this, that right then.
I mean, tier 2 is still in the ether. I don't know what it's gonna say when it comes out. And I'm having a hard time zoning for something that isn't yet, or.
That's true, and we have a housing crisis, you know,
We
so
have a
this,
housing crisis,
our job
and
is to
you
see
might
what
get
makes sense.
people off the street,
Yes,
okay? That's good, but they are generally not the workers you need to staff your hospitals and your schools and your medical facilities. And I'm trying to figure where we are putting them, because we also have a worker crisis.
I mean, you heard from Nicole Malone from Moortown that a lot of those workers are in incredibly substandard apartments wherever they can find them. So we need apartments, single family, clustered housing, cottages. Maura has a definition of elderly housing that she could share, or senior housing, or H.
Maura Collins from VHFA. I just want to say these are all previously defined terms, maybe not in state statute, but in the federal rule. You cannot discriminate by age except for elders. And so there are rules about even if it's private ownership, that, 20% of the development would have to be older. I also just think it's important to remind ourselves that when we say elderly, that doesn't always mean what we think it means. And elderly technically can be triggered by someone who's 55. I don't make the definition, but I think if ARP or other advocates were here talking about who's employed, I think it's a lot of people who are elderly. And we're talking about assisted living and all that, but it's different. But rental housing and homeownership housing both would have a federal definition of who qualifies, which includes Senator Brock's concern about what happens when someone leaves the unit. It actually has to be 80% of the residents have to meet the age threshold. It's not on an individual home basis. It's based on
Number of residents.
yeah, so like, if there's 10 homes, then 80% of them, so you can inherit a home as a younger person and not be displaced. But and then it's almost like the next available unit rule has to go to.
That's really helpful. Does that help you for now? Okay. Charlie also, I feel like we're getting lots of homemade pigeons here, but Charlie also sent us, we do have a definition of served by municipal water and sewer, which you probably were gonna say at some point from last year's
Yeah.
acting.
Well, it was cited in the second sewer discussion, so.
See, I was so happy about my chart, but I don't have my actual bill. But we're, okay, so why don't you look at the definition of served?
Yeah, I did quickly,
Great,
but
okay.
just keep, like, served is different than potentially served or
Yeah,
maybe served.
But we might limit it to served by since we're talking about interim extension.
Totally.
Okay.
May, can I just say one?
Yeah, sure.
Just a question I was going to ask Peter,
Oh, okay.
since we're talking about interim exemptions and abilities and authorities is, and you don't need to answer this now, but it would be really helpful, at least to me, to know what of our interim things that we've put in last year's bill or not interim aspects, what has been the most effective at increasing housing or developing housing? That would be very helpful for me to know, and I expect that.
It has the building permits increased since we did.
Yeah, whatever measure, right.
I hear from developers that it was the exemptions and designated centers for PHPs.
Okay.
We heard that from Kathy Byer and from Zeke Davison. So
Right,
they're doing mixed income housing and those projects are getting done a year sooner.
yes, from developers definitely, but I also want to hear from realtors, because we also want things to be changing hands, so.
And yeah, they would know more about maybe duplexes that are being
Right.
offered, right?
Or intent even.
Right, thank you. Okay. So that's a big proposal and I'll keep working on it since I didn't hear a no. But just to be clear, what I'm proposing is that we keep the 10x5x2 exemption that the governor proposed, but we increase the cap to 30 for perpetually affordable and senior housing in those same areas.
Yeah.
And then that we remove the our home act language, our sunsets and our sunset repeals, because we'd be replacing it with the governor's proposed exemptions as an interim measure and this other proposal.
I haven't seen the governor's proposal.
It's in this bill.
It's in this bill.
So the
Okay.
whole like designated centers plus half a mile eventually.
Which
Would just be
we
helpful
haven't
to
actually
know what-
chatted about.
This isn't all parts of it.
Parts of it, yeah. Okay. Any of the Act 250.
Could we put the interim proposals all in one section? Is that
I
able
think
to be done?
Or at least on a separate sheet, so that we're clear on
Okay.
which the sections are.
Yeah, cause I'm a little bit unsure about how you're using that phrase, so if you could spell, I think, yeah, so. Yes.
I hear there this, and I think Charlie and Catherine are also working on what ultimately is the best way to define this. I hear that energy and environment is also looking at some things as until the piers are in place, until the mapping is done.
Mapping and designations and
I-
things are all.
there's-
in there.
There's some concern about that, meaning we're not setting interim deadlines that keep everyone on track and that we're not ending with a certain year that says like this has to be done. So I think that's an ongoing conversation. Does that make sense?
You lost me a little bit at the end, but I think what you're trying to say is that they will be time limited and will then change based on what is established in the map.
Yes.
So,
Or either finalized or changed.
Yeah.
I mean, depending on what the final recommendation,
sure,
depending on what comes in with mapping.
Right.
Comes in with designations and what we already know of partial tier
Right.
proposal.
And that is instead of keeping our exemptions in place and repealing and having our sunset that doesn't align with this anymore. But I think we're the only housing committee looking at what to do between now and when the tiered maps are in place. So we have a responsibility to say we have to do something in the next 3 years, and hopefully it provides some guidance about what to do or not to do in the final bill.
Good. And that's another reason to have it be really clear and in one section.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
So with that said, I don't know how we would denote it as like, but this section all, besides the hotel motel conversion, even though that shows up again elsewhere, these are all interim, except the hotel motel.
Right.
where are the interim, I'm sorry, say,
I'm getting lost.
Section 6,
so,
Section 6.
It's all interim.
except the hotel motel conversion.
great, so I think what you're talking about is setting new active 50 jurisdictional
Exemptions.
triggers.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah,
Well, triggers.
yeah.
Some of them may be exemptions,
Mhm.
but some of them are, well, they're all jurisdictional triggers, so they should all be in this section 6.
That they're interim jurisdictional triggers. Is what we're saying.
Right.
Okay, I guess, so are you gonna add a sunset to them? What is
Yes.
it inherently
Yes.
makes them?
The interim will have a
Are you?
sunset,
But
which works.
yes, we haven't decided if it's when the final maps are done or by a specific year.
Okay.
And it could be both, whichever.
When the map
That could be.
includes when every municipality has agreed to what's tier 1, 2, and 3 within their municipality.
Right, when that mapping work is.
Well, and remember, I liked your idea, unless you were joking, where you said, if you don't finish it by X date, the RPC will do it for you.
I actually think that's a
Probably
great
was
idea.
Yeah.
If you were.
I love it.
Joking,
So-
it's a great idea. You know what? You can't do it.
I guess I've been at the
Thoughtful
municipal
people
level
can.
too long.
Anyway, yes, interrupt with either,
You might as well take away all local control and just say, we are the state, and this is what you're gonna do.
we've given them opportunities to actually do the work. If they're not getting the work done in a timely fashion, we have to move on.
Anybody to do it.
We want to solve that problem too,
Giving them,
but if
Lots of
these
resources.
maps are supposed to be led by them.
exactly.
So we want to give them the resources to do it. I think that's giving them a lot of local control and supporting them to get it done.
And resources through the RPCs that we're helping finance that extended technical assistance to do this work.
Finance.
And the tier 1 is a lot of local control.
Tons. I mean,
Right.
every map is local control. Just like every town plan.
We just took away a whole lot of local control. We just said, you will include quadruplexes, you will include duplexes, you will technically put 5 quadruplexes and 20 parking
That-
spaces on my 1 acre.
I don't wanna put that out there until we have more confidence about what we're doing in that section, because we haven't gone to the municipal zoning section. We're still on Act 250. Yes, we passed a bill last year that
Say,
allows
you want
multifamily housing.
Yeah, so if somebody wants to come in and put in 5 quadruplexes on an acre of land, the city can say, we don't have water and sewer capacity.
That's
Well,
correct.
that has not passed, right? That's up for consideration.
But duplexes by right, we
Yeah.
did.
We
everywhere.
also did quadruplexes. That they had to be.
On
5.
municipal water and sewer.
So you could put 5 quadruplexes, as we
Well, not
said, you have to have 5 acres, so 5.
I think we're not sure about that.
We haven't, that isn't,
Need to
Sorry,
say now.
We need to figure that out.
yeah, we're getting,
It's still in.
I'd like to get
Yeah.
a section 19, which we're not gonna do.
Okay, given our time, let's,
People are okay with the direction in section 6,
yes,
is interim measures
yes.
with a fixed time, but we're not sure how we're gonna.
We're not sure if we're gonna fix it by mapping completion or by date with carrots to get the flag work done.
Right. So we've 1 hour, and I would like to get to section 19 to address Senator Cummings' concerns, so I just wanted to do a time check.
I've been concerned with this section, but I don't know.
Okay, so we're on section 7?
Yes,
Are we on section 7?
I didn't hear any
What's the rest of section?
more
seven?
about section,
So,
Interim, I have interim all the way through section six,
except hotel motel conversion.
except for hotels exempting, yes.
So we might
And
not,
that's at the bottom of page 8 for everybody. Before we get to 7.
okay. Yeah,
So at the moment, we're proposing exempting these conversions from Act 250.
Yes.
And
They've already gone through the local planning process and review, I mean, or they wouldn't be where they are.
a lot of them may have shown up before planning and zoning.
That is possible.
And we basically saying that the town has to come up. We're taking a lot with we have.
When Ted was in the witness chair, I said, I think towns are probably very conflicted on the outcome of what it would look like to take away these hotels. Because you're talking about hundreds of people who are already treating it like long-term housing. We're talking about a budget adjustment act that might give more money for those to become permanent housing.
That's fine, I'm just saying that we are taking control over this away from the local.
Well, this is
We are
exempting it from
taking
Act
a lot-
250.
A lot, it's exemption from Act 250, is it exemption from local planning and zoning?
No, this,
Yeah.
it's not a full exemption, it's a limitation on what elements of it they can review.
So it's screening traffic,
No ways.
it's next door to a nursery school, you can't.
I don't know, Ellen's triggering a question, speaking of trigger.
But that's also
I
in the
don't know,
next,
it's on the list, but it's, yeah.
that's
There we
on
go.
page, but that's on section 20.
Right. We have,
So in this section, it's just exempt from Act 250.
We heard from anyone on this particular section.
Ted, right.
We heard from the VLCT.
That's it.
And the
we've
state.
only had
thing.
10 in here once, and most of that conversation was about the 60-day limitation.
We had
I
10,
have
right?
a real, I just sent you an email from one of my local zoning people. We are making major changes to town's ability to do certain controls within them. And we have not heard from any town planners. We've heard from regional planners, but we haven't heard from the folks on the ground.
We're getting some of them in. And Ted has come in twice, and he did raise concerns about this section.
You did,
I don't think the concerns he raised were from a planning perspective, they're from a service
Mhm.
use perspective. And I fully get that. We have a policy choice that's very difficult about what to do with motels that we've been housing. So I'm not saying it's an easy choice, but on the one hand, our policy direction we're setting with the BAA is to create permanent housing out of these places. And on the other hand, if we're saying but it has to go through Act 50 and it might take a while. And
Now, I don't want you up through Act 250, but I'm having concern about the town's ability to
Okay,
do location, I don't know that I want, no, that's different.
well, why don't we take section 20 offline for now because we want to get to section 19. And you and I can keep discussing section 20, we can bring planners in.
We need some time.
Yeah, I'm happy to, we're happy to, I mean, I don't think that would be difficult to get, whether the. But I mean, I have a planner who I'm sure would be willing to testify on this. This is all motels and hotels. It doesn't have to be places that have been housing beyond the house.
No, but we might identify new places to house them. I don't know what else to use it for, maybe SROs, but yes, it's saying we need more units of housing and these some infrastructure to be that.
Right, and they're really good for supportive housing.
Right.
They're fabulous for.
And
Yeah.
the money we're setting aside is for conversion. of
Yeah.
existing.
Speaking to 20,
I don't know.
No, so let's leave 20 off the table for now so that we can get from section 7 to section 19. And you and I can keep talking about section 20, which is where you feel like local control is being lost over the budget.
Okay, so we're,
I think.
So on page 9,
yeah.
on page 9, section 7 is new to this draft. This is about activity permits. So, and the evidence required in them. So first on page 9, the district commission shall not delay in issuing a permit, so an Act 250 permit, if on the grounds that the development or subdivision has not received one or more of the required state permits or approvals. However, it may include a condition that construction may not commence until such other required permits or approvals are received. So that's one element. The second part of this is that the Natural Resources Board shall allow the acceptance of permits for the criteria, and the district commission shall accept determination by, there's language that gets to that they are conclusive evidence,
Not rebuttable.
not rebuttable.
So I sent a suggestion to Ellen that this only apply to permits that have their own public process within A&R. So apparently not all permits are you engaged in a
right.
public process within A&R, but if you are, that would be the time to raise your concerns to A&R. I made that suggestion later, Ellen, I don't think.
Right, so because we just talked about this on.
Right.
Yeah. So, right, so currently by rule, there's a rule in Act 250 that lists which permits can be used for which criteria. So it sort of streamlines that process, gets rid of it, and so that permits issued by agencies are, and those permits have a rebuttable presumption, which means that they can be challenged as part of the process. As evidence, so this would make them conclusive evidence. And I'm looking at the language and there may need to be a couple additional words added, but I drafted this quickly the other day. So yes, the intent here is so that all outside determinations serve as conclusive evidence, therefore significantly difficult to rebut.
So in lay language, because this is all, a lot of Act 250 is challenging to translate. Sorry, Pete, but it is. Does this enable this is enabling concurrent permitting, is that my understanding?
Yeah, and
That was one.
so there's two parts to this.
Maybe I'm just trying to make this understandable for people.
Right, so, and we did review this on Friday, but this is the first time, I guess we're doing it again, there's two things that are happening in this section. Yes, it's specifically spelling out that, permitting can happen concurrently at both the state agency and at Act 250. I think this has already been happening and that this language is not necessary, but this is spelling it out. The second part of this is changing the weight that that other state agency permits are given in the evidence process at part of an Act 50 application.
So let's say you get your wildlife permit, you get your wetlands permit. Let's say, I'm not sure, but those both have an internal public process. They have a public hearing, notice period. They are still something you can raise and relitigate in the Act 250 process. And this would say your time to litigate those issues would be during the ANR process. There are some permits in ANR that apparently don't have any kind of public process, and those would still be rebuttable.
So this is one measure of reducing appeals.
Yes. Reducing a specific content.
It is limiting. I wouldn't characterize it specifically that way, but it is limiting how evidence can be challenged. If this is actually part of the initial stage for the permit application itself. So
Yeah.
it's not part of the court appeal necessarily. It could, but it is limiting when there's a party at the district commission level.
Right. So what I'm hearing is this from engineers and others in the process, is this reduces cost. They do a lot of, work to determine where wildlife is and how water flows and things like that within ANR. And if a neighbor comes with a list of new questions on the same issue, they might not even be new, but they might be worded differently, and you have to get your experts to do a lot of additional work. When your permit's already been granted, which takes a lot of work through ANR and has a public process.
Just a couple of things, so. The first section, this section 1, which is a separate issue,
Yes,
that's
concurrent.
saying that. They can issue or shall issue a permit. Even if all of the other permits have not been completed, I guess. How do you figure out the trigger of that? And I've seen situations where. 2 permits conflict with each other, the requirements of 2 permits conflict. So it might not make sense to issue a permit, an overall permit, when you're gonna have to decide.
It wouldn't
Someone's
be
gonna-
issued. It would
Well-
just be in process.
No, it says issued, and then the conditions that a construction may not commence. It doesn't necessarily say that you have to go back and figure out which one of the permits is, how to tie those 2 together. Like in water and wildlife, I mean, they can want different things. So I just think we should hear from NRB or somebody about that, because, I mean, I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
I have to.
Well, as Ellen said, this was a practice that was allowed and, in many districts, they had already been following it. You can be through in both processes at once, even if you have conflicting things. Peter, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we do have under,
Identify yourself.
Pete Gill, Executive Director of the Natural Resources Board. We do have Rule 19, which does allow applicants at their choice, whether they want to proceed with utilizing a rebuttable presumption for permits that they've received from the Agency of Natural Resources. They can have those in hand, they can have those in process, or they can decide not to utilize them. We'd be happy to understand better the committee's intent on this section and work with you on some of the language. And it sounds like it was still needs some digestion here. And just making sure that it works the way that you want it to work.
Thank
Be
you.
happy to help out with that.
Okay. Can you email at least me and Ellen, or what do you want to?
Sure.
And
If you don't mind.
yeah, and then we can have that settled by Thursday.
Yeah,
Thank
Great,
you.
we'll work on that.
I think the goal is good.
Okay,
Yes.
we'll disagree with the goal. Okay.
So on page 11, section 8 is a list of repeals. So depending on what your choices are on section 6, this list will change. So. Yeah.
Right, so this would be if I do my vision for PHPs and we sunset provisions of the Home Act, this section relates to that.
So this interim repeals.
Now it, soon to be.
But we'll do this last when we do the dates,
Yeah.
right? This
Yeah.
is.
See what we would feel about that.
Is it-
Does it
I'm not-
go
no,
effective
This
dates now?
is still about
Oh.
the 2026 sunsets we put in place and
Oh, okay,
other things that relate to that section 6 conversation.
okay,
So
no,
this
got
is
it,
not
okay,
necessarily.
I understand. Okay,
On page 11, in the prior draft, you deleted section 11, which was delegation of municipal review of Act 250. On in section 9, this is still Act 250. It's related to the mitigation of primary agricultural soil. And it's allowing for, no mitigation for alternative community wastewater systems that will serve development within designated area.
I don't have any change here.
did anyone oppose this?
Uh,
That we're-
yes, and other committees.
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
this is Senate Natural is gonna have some
Okay.
issues with this.
okay,
And also, again, depending on where you land on some of the exemptions, if you're, I think, but I'm not sure where you've landed on exemptions. So anyways, depending on how you make decisions moving forward, this.
So, do we? Do we?
If we're exempting designated center.
This is addresses the possibility that there would be prime ag soil in some of the areas we want for housing. Sure.
And that you have to do one-to-one mitigation.
and there is.
Yeah.
So we'll let natural resources figure this out. Maybe, I mean, is that,
Natural
To some
resources is gonna has opinions, strong opinions. about it.
Right. Ag has opinions too, but we also have opinions
Right.
about
so that's what
ag
we are,
oil that's in the middle of,
okay,
and mitigating it elsewhere rather than trying to make.
There was a farm where my house is built, it was a farm where the condos were built, I assume, I know it's fine ag soil, but definitely was ag soil, right?
Oh, it's,
So I generally want people to understand this section because it matters for housing. But and Natural Resources has their own comments and some people are choosing to wait till it gets there to share it.
So on page 13, section 10, we're still in Act 250, but this is, so during the last draft, I had drafted this language that's on page 13, and this is removing Act 250 jurisdiction if the use of land was for commercial purpose, but is being changed to housing. And during that last discussion, there was concern that that didn't actually capture your intent. And so on page 14, I'm offering a choice of a different construct. So instead, on page 14, there's new language that says no permit amendment is required for the construction of improvements for converting a structure used for a commercial purpose to 29 or fewer housing units.
So I'll just say I asked Ellen for the second option because it's what we looked at last year. It feels cleaner.
So-
Then I think NRB had a concern about sort of releasing a property from Act 250
So-
when it's converted.
Yes. I think this would not include municipal zoning, because again, you get to,
Right.
factory might not use a whole lot of water, but 30 housing units with sauna showers might.
Yes. Right, this is just saying we've gone through the process locally to make,
I guess I remember the question came up. What happens if you got an exemption and then nobody bought the housing and
and it continues.
or if it goes back to,
right, that, I think that's why NRB
yes,
likes the second option too, because you don't have to get a permit amendment, but the permit stays in place,
okay,
which allows you to convert it back if needed, rather than saying you're no longer part of the act.
So
okay.
I'll say it's certainly cleaner.
10B is what we're recommending that we go with,
Okay.
or,
which is on page 14. I'm calling 10B, because we have an A choice and a B choice, right?
okay,
Stop mark that.
the highlight,
I know it's not marked that, but
Okay.
we have two choices.
Some of us
We
are
have-
just having trouble following.
Yeah, no, I'm me too, I'm right with you.
Okay.
Yes, that's a choice.
I think it makes sense to
If
me.
everyone wanna say
I mean,
something.
it does read, but it makes sense to me, yeah.
And Pete's recommending it.
Right, the interview.
I don't know if I've recommended it. I haven't had that particular conversation, but I will say administratively, it is certainly cleaner.
Right.
Thank you.
That's all.
But-
Yeah,
All right, so section 11 is a new topic, and I don't think you've seen this language yet, so this is another exemption, so at the top of page 15, no permit or permit amendment is required for the construction of improvements for an accessory dwelling unit as defined, 23 VSA 4302.
And remember, this is still Act 250.
Yes.
No Act 250 permits required for an ADU.
Accessory dwelling, for an
I
accessory-
think currently
It may or may not be required, it depends on what the underlying.
where they are.
Yeah, well, what the underlying structure.
yeah, if your Act
Right.
250 permit is for 10 units, and 5 of those units put on accessory dwelling units, that, as long as you do local, but that could have drainage, wastewater, water, sewer implications.
Yeah, I mean, I think 5 at a time, I hear you, I mean,
That would be.
what we're hearing from a lot of people, I wanted to put something in my backyard for my daughter and, you know.
I'm getting the complaint that state grant is taxable.
So just to go address the.
Haven't heard that.
Hadn't heard that one yet.
I've got a very.
I can speak to that.
Do you wanna make it not
I'm looking into
I
it.
don't know, that's your, that's
I'm
that's
looking
your
into
call.
it. but I have-
Forgivable loans addressed.
Right, that's
Yeah,
right,
so
that's right, forgivable
yeah.
loan.
Thank you,
Yeah.
that's the change we're requesting, but that's a separate.
Right. Senator Clark's.
So, given those extremes, is there a qualifier that can be put in here unless there's undue additional pressure on existing utility systems or something?
Well, if the town, if you have to have a town permit, then the town can talk about water, sewer, and who does wastewater?
Town.
Yeah.
Hopefully, or
Some
develop.
ADUs are self-contained, but this is one, it says and accessory dwelling, unit, right?
Well, we tried to draft all things in singular.
Yeah, so
But-
this is one.
No,
It's not
it's
saying-
one, but if
Right.
you're in
That's the
a,
trigger, it would like, so
it could be multiple units, it could be multiple dwelling units.
also under.
Under 5 people in the development can put in.
Well, so under 4302, also, the town is only required to accept one accessory dwelling unit per property, so that actually is a good point. I don't know if you are looking to exempt if some towns have gone a little bit further and allowed multiple accessory dwelling units for structure.
Could we, if we leave it alone, does it let the town lead on if we're talking about one or multiple, or should we make that clear?
It's just in general, the construction of an accessory dwelling unit is exempt from Act 250, so I don't.
I think, I'll say, I think our intent is one per property unless the town allows for more per property. We don't wanna all of a sudden say you could,
But I
the
think,
right to put as many ADUs
Right,
as you
but
want.
as somebody in my neighborhood, we were having discussions with Vermont Power once, to put our lines out there. But where they're running them, there's a significant wetlands and drainage off the hill issue, so depending on where I place my ADU, if it's got the town zoning, which says the 10-foot setback, you know, but it depends on where you put it, you could be disrupting things, so I think there needs to be some oversight.
Right, and this doesn't change
no,
town oversight, this just
Yeah,
says if you're at the
have
property,
oversight,
yeah.
that's fine.
Act
this
250 is a
doesn't
pretty
change it.
high bar for an ADU,
Yes.
for one person.
Yeah, definitely.
As long as
That's-
there is some oversight.
Right,
about
yeah.
Yeah, this doesn't change town oversight, I'm not saying there necessarily
Right.
is, but if there already is town oversight, this doesn't change it.
Yeah, and it's the last
Does it
section of the
need a
Act 250 piece.
It depends, I mean, generally where I come from, yes. But there are ADUs that are completely self-sufficient,
Yeah,
tiny houses are,
or they're part of the main house.
yeah, or they have tanks.
they're usually part of
It's-
the house or on top of a garage or something.
Yeah.
Question though, that you have raised, and is if there's development that had triggered Act 250, therefore the development of houses was in Act 250, and every one of the houses decided to do an ADU. That's my concern, now that you've triggered my
I
concern.
mean,
And so is the septic, is the sewer,
Why not?
is the water designed to be able to carry that additional load? And that is a qualifier, I'm wondering,
that would be,
that's a qualifier that we need that in here.
that would be the town to decide.
That's the-
Right,
One we
yeah.
may get is
So I don't
runoff
need to-
or wastewater.
Right,
Whereas we've already had a place that's grown and the
Yeah.
holding tank isn't holding in the rainstorms.
right.
If you, cover up certain amount of permeable soil with a house.
Yeah.
If you get enough of them, they could influence.
But the town would, I mean, you know, it would be very interesting if like 10 people came out to put an ADU, like the same
This up.
row. You know, I think the town would have a long process related to that.
Okay.
Good. I mean, not that it's good that it's long, good that it would be a process.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, we're on to municipal zoning sections. Yeah, and we'll see how far we get. We might get to 20.
So we are, okay.
Just on page 15, section 12, first is the change of, who is an interested person, so who can appeal, under municipal zoning issues. So currently it's any 10 persons who may be voters, residents, or real property owners in the municipality. And that's changing it to 10% of the population. How do people feel?
I think that would be hard.
What's the highest amount that we have for any other things? Like there's certain things that towns do that needs 10% of something. It's either of the voters or of something.
Yeah, to get something on the ballot. But I think,
I would just like
It's
to
like a
use.
box question.
yeah.
Right,
I
well,
think that's
it's just good to use another number that's used
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that they know what it is, they're used to gathering
Well,
it.
we use percents all,
Right,
a
right,
lot.
right, for towns, there's a 5% thing and there's a 10% thing for towns.
They're,
Yeah,
they're,
to get
But I think
things
it's
on
on
the
voters.
ballot.
to
But
get your name on the ballot.
10%. I mean, to get 10% of the town angry enough to appeal, you'd have to have a pretty egregious
If-
project.
In Woodstock, you'd have to have 300 people.
Yeah.
Agreed to that.
Which is a lot.
Do
Montpelier
people
would
wanna
be
go around
800.
and say the percentage they
What
want,
would
or do you
Burlington
wanna?
do?
In.
I think there are
Montpelier, it
different
would be-
percentages. for
Yeah,
different-
Montpelier would be 800 people would have
I'd
to.
look more like 3. But whatever we have to get a petition on the ballot, you should have that to get a petition for.
Well, so actually to be on the ballot is just 50 or 100. So for the house.
That's your name, but to get
An item.
an item placed
Oh,
on the
right, you need
ballot.
5%.
It's
5 or
5%.
10%.
It's
I think it's 10.
5%.
So we're saying we
10 is
tentatively
high.
wanna tie it to the percent it takes to get something on the ballot.
Possible.
Or do people wanna talk about the percent?
I just think there should be a logic to it.
Yeah.
That,
But I also think it should be realistic, so.
We
yes,
have
this would
changed
seem
those other ones
very
over
high.
time when.
Yeah.
It should be fair.
Yeah. Fair
Yeah.
and
And one of the things that you have to consider is a small number of people may be tremendously affected adversely by actions like this. And you don't want to shut that out from the ability to have judicial.
Well, the neighbors still have their damn
Butters.
butters, yeah.
Butters do.
But we were saying it yesterday, with the
Right.
green boxes, which will be inside of my
Right.
driveway. From where they moved them, where nobody saw them. Now all the neighbors are going to see them.
Mhm,
And so that spreads the interest when you want to look at these
Mhm.
green boxes.
so somewhere between 10 people and 10% is what we're talking
Well,
about.
an issue also is the
Yeah.
size of the municipality.
Right.
Because its effect in the situation that Senator Cummings has mentioned may affect 50 people, may affect 100 people and so on. And if that happens in South Burlington, do you need to have this huge number of people?
Well, I mean, what I said in the beginning is we don't often balance it with how many people are impacted by having housing. And so some towns have had to go to great lengths to get a vote that has the majority of the community saying, yes, we want this. And is it then fair that that can be appealed? You know, it's not fair that the minority gets appeal after appeal after appeal.
Yeah, one of the things we're obviously concerned about is the number of appeals and the number of appeals that if they're not frivolous, they're close.
Right, yeah. So we're weighing
And
all
that
of
they
it.
are suppressing development by
Right.
virtue of it.
Right.
Right.
So given that conversation, what percent?
VLCT, just as a reminder, has advocated for actually removing this altogether. So this was an attempt at sort of finding a middle ground between eliminate this,
Eliminate the 10 people.
eliminate this sort of 10-person appeal altogether. Versus this saying, okay, fine, we'll keep it in place, but raise the bar.
Because they're appealing the municipal decision about something.
So,
And they don't like to appeal. But again, we talked about the color of law, bridges got built, things got done. And some people didn't have enough voice because the majority weren't affected. You wanna make sure that it's not just frivolous and I don't like any change and we shouldn't cut down any trees. But you wanna have a reasonable number of people I'm thinking someone,
I'm hearing 5% of like
I'm
in
thinking
between
3.
10 people at.
I think 5 may even be a little high.
I'm
but-
thinking 3.
I'm thinking that I think 3, I mean, I'm just, we all have to think about our own municipalities and sort of what that number is. So Woodstock, 10% is 300, 5% is 150, that's still a lot.
Like 5% would be more than 3%.
Right, I'm saying, but.
Oh, 10%. I thought you
Still
were talking about
150
Okay.
people,
Yes.
and 3%, I think,
Is 100.
yeah, I mean, that's still a lot, I mean, that's still a lot of people that have to weigh in on a project
Mhm.
that may or may not. So anyway, I would be willing to chat anything between 3 and 5%, but
Yeah, and
I think
really,
10%
that'd be
is too high.
3% would be 240 people
In Montpelier.
in Montpelier. What's the population of Burlington?
45,000.
4,000.
40,000, that's a.
So it'd be a little over 1,000, which I think you have to get more to talk about like fluoridated water, so.
It raises the bar significantly,
Right.
and we just, I think, have to land on a realistic number that really really forces
It's
people to
more
think
than
about
10
something,
and
which
less
is
than
good.
200.
Right.
And you can always do something like say, 5% for, 100, whichever's less. And
Well, that's an
pick
idea.
those numbers
Yeah.
out. Correct.
Well, that would make everyone go to 100. Right, whichever.
Well, I think that whatever.
Alright,
town-
but
I'm not
100
saying
is a
that
lot
number's
more than-
permanent,
Do you mean whichever's more? Like,
Whichever's less.
I would do,
Whichever's less.
so just 100 people in Burlington?
no,
And
I would do
Montpelier,
3%, or, I mean, like Reading, I mean, we have towns of 500, 600, 700 people.
Yeah.
To have 100 people have to weigh in.
Yeah, so it's less than.
Okay, but if we said 3%,
no,
that's not a lot, that's in a town of
it's
600.
140 people in Montpelier. You get 140 people to agree on anything, 1% is 80, which is 8 times more than we've got right now.
I'm okay with 3%. I'm okay with 3%, but I think this whole 100 is
Yeah,
really
no, I-
complicating things.
I think let's keep it at
Some towns
3%.
have lower population than that, so 3% is less than 100.
Let's look at 3% and sit with it. We have a couple days to sit with
Right,
it. Let's think about that. We'll think about it in our towns that we represent. So, in a town that's like 500 people, that's still more than 10.
Right.
Just
And just
240.
just a comment, and I appreciate you raising VLCT. If that many people are unhappy with the project, they really should discuss it and make their wishes known in the,
Exactly.
well, in the municipal process.
Exactly.
But they're not used to doing that. So I personally would like to minimize municipal appeals as much as possible. And have a really robust municipal process, which does exist in a lot of places. But because we're used to having this 10 people kind of safety valve, some would say, it might make sense to do 3% and then just have a goal of having the municipalities be able to, the ones who, especially going through the tiers, that their decision stands.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
So I do want to flag, another element of this to consider that I don't know the answer to off the top of my head, but I think somebody probably does. Is that in order to then further appeal, an interested person, so the concept you're talking about here, has to have participated in the municipal regulatory proceeding in order to appeal to the environmental division. So, participation in a local regulatory proceeding consists of offering through oral or written testimony, evidence or statement of concern relating to the subject of the proceeding. So, I don't know off the top of my head how it works currently if all 10 people have had to submit comments in order to be part of this group.
I think,
I'm asking the question because I do not know off the top of my head. If it does require currently for all 10 of those people to have submitted written or oral comments, I suspect it does.
Yeah.
Oh, you do maybe want to think about that a little bit. I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
Right.
1%. That's a lot to participate in planning and zoning.
Well,
You get 8, you're lucky.
I think we could say 3% and they don't have to have all participated in
One.
the, you know. the
There's
previous
240 people in Montpelier.
So I did just want to flag that has been there is already this existing requirement of required participation in
Mhm.
order to appeal. I don't know how it plays out with the 10-person example, but for other appeals under the statute, you have to have participated in the hearing.
Yeah.
So you should think about how you want that to work for this new concept you're discussing.
Perhaps they are limited to topics that were not raised in the municipal process or.
And that again is even more complicated, so you're gonna argue that wasn't raised and how directly.
I mean, I'd rather set it at 5 to 10% and say it can be anyone, but 3% and they have no connection to the process.
They-
It doesn't feel-
I'll go with 240 people in Montpelier. I mean,
Well, but remember, the flip side of that is there was a municipal process that probably included, you know, a couple hundred people.
we had 2 votes, so lost.
You know, this is still a very small group of people.
240 people. That's an awful lot to go from 10 to 240. You might as well just say there's no. You've got to have 240
Well,
people agree on the appeal. and then
You can get 240 people, you know, in a couple days standing in a public place at the farmer's market.
If
I like
that's a
Senator Brock's
signature.
idea where it's a percentage or a number, whichever is less. Because
So
some
we're saying in
towns-
Burlington, they would need 100 people.
Right, so maybe, but that would be, or say 150, but then in a small town, 3% could be.
20
12 or 20.
In a town of 500.
Victory's got 64 people.
Okay, but that's captured by the percentage, but you're then
Right.
saying,
So this one.
the percentage already applies in Victory, that's like 4 people.
Everybody's on the.
But you're saying that every other town that's large, it's set at 100,
I just think it's worth
Which is
talking
too
about.
few for now.
which I think is too few for South Burlington,
Okay.
Burlington, you know, big community.
Why don't we,
But you get into a Burlington, effectively, you are not gonna be able to complain about something, to appeal something that you would. And for the same reason in a smaller municipality.
Right,
Because you require such a large number, that the amount of work that you have to do that, because of the situation, for example, that Senator Cummings is talking about, that affects a neighborhood, if you will, as opposed to everybody in that community of 40,000. You're disadvantaging them by having such a huge number. You make it much more difficult to appeal the same kind of issue in that municipality that you could in a smaller locality.
yes,
And there comes a point where it becomes unfair.
right, but there also comes a point where it's unfair if 100 people in Burlington can stop a project that's supported by 45,000 other people.
Because these are people who also don't otherwise meet any of the other categories of interested person, and there are
Right.
several of those. Sorry, Alex Farrell for the record.
This is housing for people that have no vote.
No, we're not just talking housing here, though. We're talking
Yeah, you're talking
any
anything.
appeal. This could be for,
This is bigger than that.
So can
A
we say
shopping center.
5% for a housing project and
Uh,
leave the bar of 10 for everything else?
I say we go with 1%. That's 80 people in Montpelier. That's 8 times what they're being required to do now.
But 1% in a town of 500 would be 5, would be less than the 10 we have.
Yeah.
So
10 or 10. I'm ceiling at 10.
Ceiling at 10 people.
10 people. You can't go below 10. 'Cause
Except that.
Right, a floor,
Yeah.
you're talking about a floor of 10.
a floor of 10.
Okay, let's think about it. I would boldly propose we need to keep moving.
Yeah.
And
See, you'll get my thoughts, I don't-
let's keep going with 3% and or we can figure out another trigger, another floor or trigger.
Find out what it takes to get an item on the ballot.
Find out how many people vote in.
Can I just say to the ether, if
Yeah.
there are any attorneys who have worked with these groups or municipal planners who just let me know so I don't have to go Google the legal precedent on if their
Right.
participation is required for all
Right.
10 of those members.
Right.
That would be great. Thank you.
That's very low average.
And I hope it means.
People are listening. I'm not.
We've got people had to take part in a zoning
He
hearing.
doesn't do zoning.
It would be
No, that's true.
9 minutes.
And I hope it does mean something that
Do you know the
VLCT
answer?
wants to
I
see
don't
this
know.
raised because that's
Some
all
Yeah,
said they
control.
wanted- Yeah, they don't want to see their things appealed in general.
But local
It's-
control means you have a whole community that needs something
Right.
and the town's making a decision about it.
So VLCT would want the percent to be higher.
Yeah.
At 3?
At 10.
I'm sure they would, they don't even want this to be an option at all.
They don't
Well,
want
I,
this
they
section.
don't want, that's fine. Do we just want to have no local things?
They are the local.
That's it. So no local things can be appealed, which is what the local planning would like,
From people who are not adjoiners.
Exactly.
not a joint.
I think that
These
should
are
be a long-term goal, but we should take interim steps because it's so new and we're used to the other. And just have logical steps to get.
Did we decide not to do an appeal program, or did we, I'm on the.
I
It's
thought, my suggestion is maybe an informal study. I don't think this could be our one study that we get in the
But
bill.
it's
We
not.
could take it out. Or if somebody, I mean, I just don't know who would claim responsibility for that informal study.
Okay.
But no, it's not a ledge
Not
council.
getting-
thing.
Not getting charged.
So actually, though, I did want to, before you get ahead of me, so on page 16, though, there's a whole other set of language
Yes.
related to
Yeah,
appeal.
I was gonna say, there's a lot of other.
Before- And
language.
appeal bodies, yes, but so on page 16, still in this concept of municipal appeals. So for purposes of this section, an appeal shall not include the following. Any residential and mixed use development containing up to 25 dwelling units within areas served by municipal sewer and water infrastructure. Any permitted residential and mixed use development that does not require conditional use review. Development that does require conditional use review may be appealed. And any housing or mixed use development located within a designated center in a zoning district that allows residential development. So this is limiting residential appeals of residential development.
And remember this, Kathy Byer and the Putney project. A lot of people have said this section makes the biggest difference to them
So this is like,
of making housing less expensive and far faster.
You basically can't appeal
right, in this,
if there's water. and sewer.
Municipally. This is municipal appeals. And it's in designated areas served by water and sewer, and it's less than 25 units municipally.
You still get some control. Right? At the municipal level.
Yeah, the municipality still has control. It's people can't
I'm
appeal
just
the
thinking of
municipal decision.
Quadruplexes that can be put up. as-
Right. It's kind of exactly what Kathy said. The municipality said for 20 years, we want housing here. Someone came along
one
at the
person,
very end and said, I'm gonna appeal it in multiple avenues.
God, no, she's been appealing it all.
Right,
Yes. And not conditional use, because conditional use is more complicated, so you can appeal that.
Yes.
So Yeah, I think this is actually gonna make a bigger difference.
Right.
Yeah. I think
Yes.
The number difference, yeah.
Katie.
Hi, Katie Gallagher with DNRC. I just messaged John Groveman, who has a bit more, not to bring us back to the any 10 persons question.
Okay.
His belief is that it is true that any 10 people would have needed to participate in those municipal hearings and that it is enforced generally.
Okay.
So all of them would have, each of them.
Okay.
So that does.
Which means they would have
thank
had to speak, not just
Right.
sit.
Or submit written comments. So yes, so if you're gonna pursue that idea,
Yeah.
you may wanna either.
That's very-
Think about your intent on
Okay.
that.
Right.
Is it
Thank you. I always was like.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
the Secretary of State of the municipality that enforces it?
The court, probably.
Right,
Mm.
right.
That's why it takes so long.
They have to read.
And we do want to encourage people to participate.
They just have to
When
check them off the
so when
list.
they go to court to appeal, the attorney who's representing them would provide the statement that yes, all of these people meet the classification for this category, so. Yes.
Okay, very helpful.
So they have to, sorry, just to clarify, Katie, they have to have participated in the hearings and or submitted comments.
Participation is, defined as written or oral comments as part of the hearing.
So.
But-
240 people, 3% to participate in a local zoning hearing
Mhm.
would make that zoning hearing last about a year.
I think we agree that we're not trying to set the same
Where do they
threshold.
sit?
Well, that's what I'm
think about
trying to
it.
figure out, what are you gonna
We're
put
gonna
in
think
that
about
40 people in the
I-
auditorium?
We have 20 minutes and I would like us to get to 19 and because you raised a lot of concerns there, so. Appeal bond
Katie,
will
that
be
was
who
great.
comes forward with an informal study.
Okay, so on page 17, section 14 is on parking bylaws.
So this is where in my last draft, I noted that we had the conversation about 60 days.
Oh, yeah,
And it
Yeah.
appeared because one option was like, we just don't like it, but what I heard from the committee is that we might look at 6 months.
Sorry, are we talking about appeals bond or are we talking about?
There's a section that,
on page 17, the highlighted sentence
Ah.
that is struck. You requested that it be struck in the last draft, but apparently that you don't want it to be struck, so.
I just don't remember
What
us
is
landing on it being struck. It,
So, yeah,
I thought we landed on, is 6 months a reasonable time frame to ask that they get back or that there's some other, not that they then, it's approved by right, but like something that an extension is agreed upon.
so if you have,
Oh, before we call.
No,
no, okay, so let me just, so if you have
Thank you,
section, if
Richard.
you have draft 4.1 nearby.
Yes, we do.
So,
No,
I have it right here.
and I can
I'll share it with
change my, okay, it's on page 19.
Okay.
It was the prior section 17. And so yes, this is also about appeals. And so the language on page
We talked about
19
6 months.
was about the municipal panel who was reviewing, actually, this wasn't about appeals, sorry. This is about when the panel initially issues the permit.
And
So,
You said
Mhm.
6 months at a minimum. Cause
I just,
60 days you
I
thought.
just don't want to go there.
Dan didn't want to go there. Others were talking about 6 months to just say, is that a reasonable time to ask for something to be disposed of?
And it depends on the scale of the project, I think,
That's
is
it.
what
You
Ann's.
heard, the LCT say that what you're gonna do is get a lot of denials. Because the ones that take longer are frequently ones where they're working out stuff.
And then
with the
I
developer.
said, what if it's agreed upon by the parties to get an extension? Which he thought would somewhat take care of that, where they know it's a big project and they don't want to just take their denial and leave.
I could do 6 months on that. 60 days is just, that's 4 months.
Yeah, no,
60 days is
I'm
what-
reopening this because we talked about 6 months. Because I actually think that just gives us more information about where it's taking longer than 6 months.
Wait. So,
So this,
You get all 240 people having to testify, it's gonna take a lot.
are we
Expedite.
keeping the application shall be deemed approved?
No,
that's the whole, well,
That's
the
what
point.
we're,
That's the whole point.
Yeah,
I know, I don't wanna go that far, I like to work, I wanna work on something that says like, you know, you have to make a decision within that time. without a stick behind it.
Okay.
And that language that you're talking about, we don't have yet.
No,
Okay,
is that,
so
so
this is gone now.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I.
Okay, no, I guess I'm
Change.
asking that as a question. Is this gone now? Is that what
Yes.
the
Yes.
crossing
Yes.
is?
That's
Yes,
what it is.
okay. I just wanna be.
this would be, so you'd be saying you have
Thank you.
to,
Sorry.
you know, you have to dispose of this application in 6 months. Unless both parties agree to an extension, which captures the bigger projects. And there's no punishment right now. I
Yeah,
just want information about where are they not happening in 6 months?
Yeah.
And why?
Couldn't we
But
get
unless both
that,
parties.
I mean, I think the league could get us, the regional planning could get us information without having to say you will do it within 6 months. I
I
don't
don't
know.
wanna see it done in 6
I
months
would,
in most
I'd like
cases.
to at least encourage it, and if there's
Yeah.
no stick behind it.
But you said you shall do
One
it.
of our biggest problems is this whole issue, all the stuff that we put in a
Yeah.
bill. Time is the problem that we're not really dealing with. This deals with time.
Yeah, and we're trying to deal with time in other places as well. But what I thought I heard you say was
Mhm.
6 months and or with a larger project, an agreement with NRB or whoever, or the
Agreement
town
between the
to-
parties, the developer and the.
an agreement with it, with the parties to extend that to a date certain. I mean, if possible.
I think this, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, the agreement of the developer would just, the developer would just say no.
But then.
I don't-
No, but I mean, what Ted said is you're gonna see a lot of denials. Because they don't
Right.
feel like they have enough time. So developer's not gonna say no if that means they get a no back at 6
Right, so we're not saying they would get a yes back.
No, we're not saying.
No,
So then
we're
why
gonna
would we
get a
even
decision
have an agreement?
back.
That's what I'm,
No, but it's.
Because I think the question is, do we wanna encourage these things to be completed in 6 months unless they're a larger?
In some things, 6 months is not enough time, and many times it's because of the developer, that they change their mind, or things are more complicated.
So if we said there, I really think if that's not the case, then we should be looking at some time frame that these decisions are made.
I think we should find out if there's a problem before we solve it.
I think we should take more testimony on time and also look at what we've already done. Because what we did last year may actually improve processes.
Let's take the vote. So Anne, you're saying you don't want this section at all.
I'm saying, we all know terrible incidents, for something stressful. But I need to know that there's a problem there, that towns are not putting any effort to get permits out a reasonable amount of time before I fix a problem I don't know is there. Allison?
I can see 6 months plus an ability to extend dependent on state, on the parties agree.
That's where I am. Randy?
I'm almost reluctant to have it go that long, but I can live with it.
Yeah, because
But I think the time needs to be in there.
Oh.
I sense the more aggressive it is, the better, and 6 months seems like a very long time to me.
I don't have the language in front of me that we're talking about.
So you're willing to see the language?
Yes,
Okay.
I think what
but
we're
if we're saying 6 months is it,
We're saying 6 months extension if the parties agree, and that nothing, you don't get punished. We're just encouraging you to take 6 months or less.
but it's more that alright, so I'd like to see the language.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna flag quickly, I don't think at this stage there are formal parties beyond the applicant, because this is the initial permit application stage.
So really, the applicant agrees. They're agreeing with the municipality.
Right, so it's more of like a waiver.
Yes.
So they could extend with the party, I mean, the party is the town and the applicant.
So whatever, however you phrase that.
Which could actually make the process longer, because then you have something else to argue about.
I wouldn't make it.
But just see
Yeah.
the language.
Yes, thank you, see the language.
I mean, it's like everybody says Acts 250 is the problem, ask them, and they say, oh, no. Now 99% of our things go through in 6 months or less. And I'm just dealing with the outcome.
Okay,
So I
I
wanna
still
know
like
if
us to get to
there's a
section 19, so we're not leaving until we get to section 19.
So, So section 14, which is on page 17, this is about specific parking bylaws that the municipality shall allow, so making it consistent with the language that you added in 4414. Then there's the tandem parking question about narrow parking spaces to accommodate 2 or more vehicles in single file line, allowing those to count, and then parking space standards, which is setting it at 8 feet by 16 feet. And then there's language about allowing existing non-conforming parking spaces to count towards the requirement. And then adjacent lots shall allow access parking spaces in an adjacent lot to count towards residential parking requirement.
And this is where you wanna talk about the dates.
No.
Okay.
When you say tandem, I understand 2 cars. But we frequently get 2 car, and have 2 tandems together, so you have 4 in very narrow, tight spaces, and I know Montpelier didn't used to allow those, I don't know if they changed them. Because if you're in that front line and there's 2 guys next, you can't get out unless you go rouse 3 neighbors to let you out. So I'm wondering, tandem 2, 1 behind is one thing, but 2 tandems next to each other is a much more difficult thing.
Yeah, then you'd have to really have a minimum width so that you can navigate.
I think the argument here is that the market, will determine if someone can live with having a tandem parking spot, which there are a lot of places where people do live with that. It probably lowers the cost of the place they're renting because they're not, getting it easily, or they decide not to rent it. But a lot of people don't need their car all the time, and are comfortable kind of paying less because they're not a frequent car user. Or they have it.
I may, this is also a tool that's sometimes used to reduce the number of units in there, so.
Right.
Upbuild that building we were describing, it's too wide. This could theoretically enable that to now be permitted for 4 units, sorry, Alex, Farrell, 4 units. Rather than if they were just like, we're only gonna count them as 2 spots, you could theoretically end up with that building that would only be permitted for 2.
Right.
And so it's just artificially lowering the number of units you have.
Even if someone doesn't have a car,
Right.
which sometimes people are like, great, I'll take this place because I could walk everywhere. Just need to walk to the hospital or whatever. So we're okay with it.
Was it all of it?
That was the question.
Yeah, I have just a couple of things. I am good with tandem because it's similar to what we did last year where we said, can't require more spaces than are already there.
Mhm.
I think that would have a bigger impact than this.
Mhm.
The adjacent lots, when I've seen this used, you generally, if it's parking that is actually required,
Yeah,
and if we're assuming that we're not requiring access parking,
right.
you normally want to have the some control
Yes.
or at least an agreement
That's a great flag. I'm
with
sorry.
yeah
Yeah,
with the
I should have
offsite
caught
parking.
that.
I think offsite parking is great.
Completely agree.
The
So,
Bell Swamson couldn't have had.
yeah, it has to be some agreed upon adjacent lot that they have a contract.
But is adjacent off-site?
It doesn't have to be, yes.
Yeah,
I would
That
call
is
adjacent offsite,
the
so what?
definition.
And I would say not necessarily just adjacent, it could be a block away.
It could be a parking
perfectly fine.
garage.
Right.
Yeah,
So adjacent, I thought adjacent had to be next door.
no, adjacent is next door, but I would use,
Adjacent or off-site.
I would use
Mhm.
off-site instead of adjacent, and I would say
Yeah,
required, and I would say
Thank you.
required parking somewhere in here.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because,
Oh, it does say required parking. Cancel that.
But yeah, I got you.
parking
Emma.
isn't free, parking
No, I
garages
know.
are not free.
I know,
They're expensive, and someplace else in here, we did that, you have to be able to walk to a public.
Right.
To park your car. It's pretty expensive, we used to let you park where we had snow bans in the city hall parking lot, I think the police even gave you rides home. But now they need to plow the parking lot because it's much bigger, and
right.
so you can't park there overnight.
I mean,
And-
parking increases the cost of of housing. You know, people pay a premium to be able to park.
But what you're saying
Or they
here
live in
is
suburbia.
somebody's gonna pay a premium to park in parking.
Not necessarily.
It might be included in the price of rent.
Yeah.
In Burlington, it is an additional charge because some people don't have a car because they can walk everywhere. And so in some ways, we're just getting away from car culture. We do have to move on.
I mean,
So,
Yeah.
you know, we're either looking for new language in the future or like,
I
we
think
can't
we
live with this.
need new language for, under
Yes.
adjacent and or offsite.
Agreed, thank
It's
you.
gotta be like leased on a permanent basis.
right,
Right.
that's where
It's
the
a contract,
agreement
yeah.
would be. So the landlord would be responsible for
Mhm.
providing the parking.
Exactly.
And how the landlord figures it out with the tenant is
Right,
that there.
A space comes with the apartment, no matter.
getting so close,
There has to be some issue regarding duration.
Yes,
right,
Yeah.
I lease it this year and next year I'm not
Right.
leasing it.
right.
okay, I'm writing that down.
It has to be for the duration.
Long term.
Okay,
And then I guess the question becomes, why, if it has to be long-term, what obligation do you make on the owner of that piece of land? It's not the person who's engaged in this transaction.
you find another space,
Well, I mean, again, you make an arrangement with your neighbor two doors over, that
Yeah.
you're going to have that space available to meet your need.
right?
So if you sign something to say that,
Mhm.
does it have to be something in effect signed or presented by the owner of the land confirming?
Yes,
Yeah,
And so,
yeah, a signed
yeah, as
contract,
long as
yeah,
the
yeah,
language
okay.
indicates
Yes.
that this has to be extended so that it is real.
yes.
They essentially would be have to agree to like a year
Is that a
time
year?
frame or
Is-
20 years.
Is that a year? Is-
I don't think we're gonna say 20 years.
Well, they do that. Well,
I
It
just
could
think
be
it
the
needs to be,
duration
whatever we
of
do,
the
it
contract,
needs to be
yes.
clear, that's all.
Right,
Right,
that
yes,
is the duration of the lease.
Yes.
Just let it be with the duration of the lease.
Right.
well,
So you have a lease
this
for
is more
1
of a
year.
conversation,
So,
but we can have it next
what
time
comes
to
up?
see the.
Yeah, what
Language.
comes.
Allison's gonna start to get anxious if we go too much longer.
Well, I'm just gonna.
Oh, I have a school superintendent in 3 minutes, I need to
I have a
go.
meeting.
Okay,
And
let's
have-
let's just go to section
This
19,
guy can only come.
Can we talk about this really quickly?
which, okay,
What?
This is the one I wanted to talk about. So section 15 is amending last year's parking language, and so this is the one that needs to sync
oh,
up.
I thought you were saying not 14 or 15.
Okay.
No, yeah, I mean, these
Yeah.
are separate concepts.
Okay.
So last year in the bill, you did this, saying that any district served by municipal water and sewer infrastructure that allows residential uses, a municipality shall not require more than one parking space per dwelling unit.
Mm-hmm,
So you did that last year.
yes,
And then they may require 1.5 parking spaces for duplexes and multi-unit dwellings if not in areas served by municipal water and sewer
mhm,
and located more than a quarter mile away from public parking.
mhm,
So the new language is being proposed that says the number of parking spaces shall be rounded up to the nearest whole number.
yeah,
So it's adding this language. And then also back on page 1,
yeah,
there's the conversation about the effective date of this language. So currently, as the Home Act was passed, sorry, it was page 2. It was set to go into effect on December 1 of this year, so you were giving the municipalities a year and a half. The language on page 2 is moving it up to July 1
Page
of this
19.
year. I'm on page 19, but I'm reminding you
mhm,
that on page 2 is
Right.
the effective date for
This
the
is what we have to
language.
think about.
So this is the two things that you need to keep in alignment.
yeah.
Right.
I would like all the parking changes to be up to July 1. Because I think right now, a lot of towns are gonna start pushing projects out just by, I mean, we saw that with a headline project last year that said, well, right now you're building it and you can't have enough spots in it. Really delayed the Moortown project, even though our intent was that ultimately that kind of project could be built with the number of spots that it has.
So you want it to be earlier?
Yes, I would move all of the
The
parking sections up
effective
to
date
July 1.
earlier.
And everything goes.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay, I would like people to stay to get to section 19 to answer so we have in our minds what we're prepared to talk about the rest of the week. We are hearing that, and I'm glad Alex is here too, because I'm hearing from the committee that they don't align with the with the idea of allowing five multi-unit five potential quadruplexes on 1 acre by rule. So I'm hearing that loud and clear. Is that what this section does?
So this section actually does a few different things, but I think you're talking about page 22.
Yeah.
Wait. I don't want five.
Oh, I said, yeah, but I'm looking at the section.
Yeah, it is, the section 12 language. So,
Section 12.
Why do I have a section 19?
sorry, all right, so you're on page 22 into page 23, page 21.
Oh, I
into-
see.
Sorry, this is a long section that has multiple comments,
Yeah.
concepts in it. So on section 19, starting on page 21.
That's duplexes are permitted, not like shall be permitted instead of.
Instead of permitted or allowed.
Yeah, so there's quite a few things in here we haven't talked about yet. So last year, so on page 21. I'm sorry, you wanna talk about just the 1/5 of an acre?
I think that would be good, given the time. I
Okay.
just wanna understand how we align our intent with the language. Because I am hearing from committee members, they can't stand with 5 quadruplexes on 1 acre by right on municipal water and sewer.
Okay, right, so in the first part, yes, in last year's bill, you did add the language that, multi-unit dwellings of 4 or fewer units shall be a permitted use. Unless a district specifically requires multi-unit structures that have more than 4 dwelling units. And on page 22, a permitted use on that lot that is at least 1/5 of an acre in size. So yes, so that would allow 4 plexes on 1/5 of an acre.
Right. But if someone has 1 acre, do they have to go through the town to subdivide?
No.
Okay.
Well, why?
So my question, so let's say you have a single family home on 1/5 of an acre. If you look at it from above, 1/5 of an acre is a pretty decent size. My property in Burlington is 1/5 of an acre, and it's 5 bedroom guest house. So, I don't need anything, but what people are saying is 1/5 an acre is pretty big for studios, for, things like that. And so they want to be able to say, you could have you could create a multi-unit property in an existing single family home. What I hear that I don't think we're necessarily intending is if you have an acre, you can subdivide it into 5 different lots without any intervention and create 5 subdivisions that each have a multifamily dwelling. That's what I'm hearing, but what worries me is I've always felt like we've confused people more by saying 5 units per acre, which could be single family homes, but you're just saying you can't have 1 acre towns. Versus on municipal water and sewer, you have to allow more than duplexes, you have to allow triplexes and quadruplexes. I think somewhere along the lines, we made a mistake in marrying those together, if that makes sense, fully. But I don't want a community to say every new unit, you have to add 1/5 of an acre. So that if you have a quadruplex, you have to have 4/5 of an acre. That's a lot more than a quadruplex needs in some cases. Does that make, so
Yeah, and
I just made the language for that, but I get that people don't wanna all of a sudden allow 20 units on an acre where the town has no possibility to intervene about that size. Does that make sense?
I just need you to tell me what it is you want it to say.
Right. Well, I guess what I want is to make the 5 units per acre somehow sort of draw a bright line between that and multifamily housing on less than an acre. Because otherwise we're saying 5 structures on an acre can have as much housing within them that they want. And that's not what we're intending. I just.
What you could do is have two measures, like you could have a density measurement
Right,
for overall, and then you can have for a minimum lot size
right,
requirement.
yeah,
I think if we had time, Alex's department has some really nice, visuals showing what we
Right.
did last year.
yeah.
And I think that would be very
Yes.
helpful for us
Yes.
and folks who are listening and watching.
We don't have to be done with this section. I just wanted to make sure I'm clearing with Ellen what it does do. And we're starting to talk about what we wanted it to do. Because we're gonna have some more testimony from other folks on this issue and are you on schedule previous, I think there's others who wanted to provide.
So I, just so you know, I think I put in 4 options.
Oh, okay.
Because I was trying, there was a lot of talk on this or confusion, so there are, everything that says number 12 in this section are different choices.
Okay,
So you do have, I think, well, and they're handling a couple different aspects
Right.
of that too.
yeah,
So. But also, if the more you can crystallize your intent,
right,
it'll be easier to draft. I think one thing that you were wrestling with is the fact that previously municipalities had pretty broad discretion on how they set their zoning standards, and last year's bill was a sort of first attempt on narrowing some of that, and it is maybe tricky to land on those things if you're not thinking about the other dimension.
right. I think that's fair.
So that it's hard because I can't just say necessarily, well, you have to be specific in drafting.
Right,
So
like,
letting me know your
yeah.
specifics so that I can actually articulate. 'Cause
Yeah.
I do think there are some other issues in this entire section that last year's bill.
right. Yes. So I will do my best. I'm looking around the table in the room for help with this, but do people agree with where the direction that we're saying we didn't wanna really go to 20 units on an acre, but we wanna make sure if someone has less than an acre, they can still have multifamily housing without it having to be 1/5 of an acre per unit, which honestly is a bit of overkill. I mean, you can get a lot out of 1/5 or 2/5 of an acre. So we set a little bit more specificity in between.
Yeah, I guess in some small towns, it might stick out, it might be.
Well, this is on municipal water and sewer.
Okay. Yeah. It sounds reasonable, I think we should have pictures,
Yeah.
so that we can
Okay.
visualize it,
So
so I think that helps a
sure.
lot.
Yeah.
So I can see what my team has, and maybe have Chris Cochran join me one day.
Well, we
Right, Jake
talked to
has-
Magali because we will have Chip Sawyer and Freud Parent. We've invited them to come in.
Okay, they might also have visuals that would achieve the same thing.
Right,
So
right.
that might not be necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the hard part is they might share the same visuals and feel differently about how much housing can exist, so it still will be a metropolitan.
That's reasonable though, yeah.
I can see this being one of the bigger sticky points that we need to
Right,
address.
and this is why it would be really good to see how helpful what we did last year has been so far. I know it hasn't been a long time,
Yeah,
but there might be some real life stories of trying to.
well, right, and Chip can bring a real life story of saying what he thought we intended was 1/5 of an acre per unit.
Okay.
And
Oh, I'm in.
I
I'm so
don't
sorry.
think that's what we intended.
Okay. I agree.
You might say a little bit more percent per unit, but
It's gonna be the stacks.
Okay.
okay, thank you everyone for staying later. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you.